The atmosphere inside the alien warship crackled with tension. Captain Donovan Walsh stood at attention, his steel-gray eyes scanning the room. Before him, towering in alien authority, stood Commander Xelfar of the Kragan Empire. Her iridescent skin shimmered under the dim lights, and her eyes, glowing faintly violet, locked onto his with a mixture of irritation and something else he couldn't quite place. Human. Xelfar's voice was like a cold wind slicing through the air. You must inspect my body. Donovan's eyebrows shot up in surprise. His hand instinctively tightened around the datapad he held, fingers flexing against the smooth surface. Commander, I don't think that's necessary. Our scan. Your scanners missed something, she interrupted, her voice growing sharper. I can feel it. A disturbance. Anomalies. Your primitive technology won't detect them. Her long fingers hovered over her chest, tracing an invisible line across her torso. Donovan swallowed the growing unease that sat heavy in his chest. The Kragan commander had never been one for diplomacy, but her demands were growing stranger by the day. First, she insisted on landing on the human base, despite her superior technology, and now this. He tried to regain his composure. With all due respect, Commander, I'm a soldier, not a doctor. If there's something wrong. I did not ask for a doctor. I asked for you. Xelfar interrupted once more, stepping forward. Her height dwarfed his, and her angular face betrayed no emotion as she loomed over him. I need a human's touch. Your race has a way of sensing what our machines cannot. I've heard the legends. Legends. Donovan felt the ground beneath him shift in a way that was more than physical. This was not just another mission. Something deeper was happening here. His instincts flared, telling him that this wasn't just about a malfunctioning piece of tech. The Kragan had been watching humans closely for a reason, one that he was now dangerously close to uncovering. He squared his shoulders, refusing to let her towering presence intimidate him. If that's the case, I'll do what I can. Her eyes flickered with approval, though it was fleeting. Good. Follow me. The tension between them thickened as Xelfar turned and strode toward a sleek door that hissed open as she approached. Donovan followed, unsure of what he was walking into but knowing that somehow this was the start of something much larger than an inspection. The narrow corridor beyond the door was dimly lit, the cold metallic walls casting long shadows. As they walked, Donovan's mind raced. Why him? And what could she possibly mean by a human's touch? The Kragan were not known for indulging in human superstitions or beliefs in anything beyond cold, hard logic. Yet here he was, walking into a situation that felt more like a riddle than a military operation. Where are we going? Donovan asked, trying to keep his voice steady as they turned a corner. The hall seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of them, the silence between each footstep oppressive. To my private chambers, Xelfar replied without turning to face him. It is the only place secure enough. His unease deepened. He had been aboard Kragan ships before, but never in an area so secluded. Private chambers were reserved for only the highest-ranking officers, where strategic decisions were made and classified discussions took place. And now, he, a mere human soldier, was being taken into the very heart of it. Finally, they arrived at another door, larger and more ornate than the rest. It slid open with a low hiss, revealing a spacious chamber unlike anything Donovan had expected. The room was filled with strange artifacts, some glowing with an ethereal light, others floating midair as if defying gravity. The air here felt different, charged, almost alive. Xelfar stepped inside first, gesturing for Donovan to follow. As soon as he crossed the threshold, the door closed behind them, sealing with a sound that made his heart skip a beat. He was truly alone with her now. Commander, Donovan started, his voice a touch more wary. I need to know what exactly you think is happening. What are these disturbances you mentioned? Xelfar moved to the center of the room, her back still to him, her hands rising slowly as if to grasp the very air around her. Our bodies, human, she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. They are more than just flesh and bone. They are conduits, vessels for the energy that flows through the universe. My people, we have long believed in controlling that energy, mastering it. But something is wrong. Donovan watched her closely, his mind struggling to piece together what she was saying. Wrong? You mean with your body? Is this some kind of biological issue? No, she turned, her violet eyes glowing brighter now, locking onto his. It's not biological. It's something deeper, something your people may understand even if you don't realize it. There are forces at play that our technology cannot touch. I believe you humans can sense these forces in ways we cannot. Donovan blinked, taken aback. You think I can sense something that your technology can't? Why would you think that? Zelthar stepped closer, the glow in her eyes intensifying. Because we've seen it. Your kind, in moments of desperation, have defied logic. Your soldiers have performed feats that should be impossible. Your instincts sharper than our finest sensors. We have studied it, your resilience, your ingenuity. We do not fully understand it, but we know it's real. He frowned. You're saying you've been watching us, testing us. In a way, yes, she admitted, unblinking. We do not view you as weak, human. On the contrary, your kind has something we do not. A connection to forces that we have long forgotten how to access. And now, I need you to use that connection. Donovan felt a strange pull at her words, a mix of fear and curiosity. He was no scientist, no mystic, yet something about the way she spoke stirred something primal in him. He had seen things in battle, moments where his body moved before his mind could process, where luck and instinct seemed to align in ways that defied explanation. Was that what she was talking about? He took a deep breath, trying to make sense of it all. Okay, Commander. What do you need me to do? Zelthar tilted her head slightly, her gaze never leaving his. I need you to touch this, she said, motioning to a small, floating crystal-like object that hovered between them. It pulsed with a faint, warm light, its surface shifting as if alive. Donovan hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, his hand outstretched. As his fingers neared the crystal, the warmth grew more intense. Not painful, but familiar. A strange sensation washed over him as his fingertips made contact. It was like static electricity at first, but then deeper, as if his whole body was tuning into a different frequency. Suddenly, the crystal flared with light, and Donovan gasped, his mind bombarded with images, flashes of stars, galaxies, and something dark, lurking at the edges of it all. He tried to pull back, but found his hand locked in place by some unseen force. His heart pounded as his vision blurred, and for a moment, he felt like he was floating, untethered. Do you feel it? Zelthar's voice was distant, echoing through the haze. The disturbance, the imbalance. Donovan tried to speak, but no words came. His mind was being pulled deeper into the visions, the swirling chaos of light and shadow. And at the center of it all, he could see a shape, dark and monstrous, coiling its way through space. He felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine as the shape turned, and for the briefest moment, he swore it was looking right at him. The vision held Donovan in its grip, the monstrous shape looming closer, as if it could feel his presence within the swirling chaos. His instincts screamed at him to pull away, to sever whatever connection had been formed between him and the crystal, but his body wouldn't respond. He was a prisoner in his own mind, watching as the darkness expanded, reaching out tendrils of shadow toward him. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the vision shattered. Donovan staggered back, gasping for breath, his hand ripping free from the crystal's surface. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, empty sensation in his chest. His vision cleared, and he found himself back in the chamber, the strange floating artifact still gently pulsating with light. But everything felt wrong. Zelthar was watching him intently, her violet eyes narrowing as she studied his reaction. You saw it, didn't you? She asked, her voice low and intense. The darkness. Donovan nodded slowly, still trying to process what had just happened. What? What was that? He managed to choke out, his throat dry. Zelthar stepped closer, her gaze unreadable. That human is what we have been trying to understand for centuries. The disturbance I spoke of, it is not merely a malfunction in my body or an anomaly in our technology. It is something far more dangerous, something that threatens both of our species. Donovan felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying this thing is out there, and it's real. It is more than real, Zelthar said, her voice taking on a somber tone. It is growing, spreading. We have detected its presence across multiple sectors, creeping closer to the heart of our galaxy. It feeds on energy, corrupts it, distorts it. Our technology cannot stop it. But humans have a connection to the very force it seeks to devour. You felt it, didn't you? That pull. Donovan clenched his fists, trying to shake the lingering sense of dread. I don't know what I felt, but it wasn't good. And if you've known about this for centuries, why haven't you done something about it? Zelthar's lips pressed into a thin line. We have tried. Our greatest minds, our most advanced technology. None of it has been able to halt its spread. We believed for a time that it was a natural phenomenon, something we could contain. But then we began to study humans. Your kind has an uncanny ability to survive, to adapt. And more than that, you seem to resonate with forces beyond what we can measure. It's why I brought you here, why I needed you specifically. Donovan frowned. So I'm supposed to be what? Some kind of weapon against this thing. I don't know the first thing about what you're talking about. Zelthar shook her head. Not a weapon. A conduit. You've already felt the connection. All you need to do is harness it. He blinked, his mind racing. How am I supposed to harness something I don't even understand? She paused, her expression softening slightly for the first time. I can guide you, but I cannot do it for you. The connection is yours. But know this, human. If we do not act, this darkness will consume everything. Your people, my people, the entire galaxy. The weight of her words pressed down on him. And for a long moment, Donovan was silent. This was beyond anything he had ever trained for, beyond anything any human had likely ever faced. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, something inside him stirred. A deep, instinctual resolve. All right, he said, his voice steadier now. I don't know how, but I'll do whatever it takes. I won't let this thing destroy us. Zelthar nodded, a hint of relief flickering in her eyes. Then we must begin immediately. There is little time. She turned and moved to a console embedded in the wall, her fingers gliding over the controls. The room dimmed further, the pulsing lights from the floating artifacts growing brighter in contrast. Donovan could feel a subtle change in the air again, like the hum of an engine just beneath the surface. I will show you how to channel the energy, Zelthar said, her voice now more focused. But first, you need to understand its flow. Close your eyes. Donovan hesitated for only a moment before complying. The darkness behind his eyelids felt different from the vision. It was calm, like the deep quiet before a storm. Feel the space around you, Zelthar instructed, her voice soft but firm. The energy is all around us, in the air, in the objects, even in me. You are a part of that flow. At first, Donovan felt nothing, just the empty space and the faint hum of the ship's systems. But as he focused, a subtle warmth began to spread through his chest, like a distant ember catching flame. It wasn't strong, but it was there, pulsing gently in time with his heartbeat. Good, Zelthar's voice came, barely above a whisper. Now focus on that warmth. Let it grow. Let it fill you. He did as she said, concentrating on the sensation. Slowly, the warmth intensified, spreading through his limbs, into his fingers, into his mind. It was a strange, comforting sensation, like being wrapped in a blanket of light. But then, Just as the warmth began to settle, he felt a sharp jolt, an icy spike of cold that cut through the warmth like a knife. His breath caught in his throat as the darkness from the vision surged forward, clawing at the edges of his mind. Focus. Zelfar's voice snapped through the haze, urgent now. Do not let it overwhelm you. Donovan gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain control. The warmth was slipping, being consumed by the dark tendrils that sought to pull him under. But something deep inside him pushed back, a stubborn, unrelenting force that refused to yield. With a final surge of will, he forced the darkness back, the warmth flooding back into his body. He gasped, opening his eyes, the world snapping back into focus. Zelthar stood before him, her expression one of cautious approval. You are stronger than I anticipated, human, but this is only the beginning. Donovan wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart still racing. What the hell was that? The darkness, Zelthar replied grimly. It is already within you. But now you have a weapon. The question is, can you wield it before it consumes you? Donovan's pulse still raced as the weight of Zelthar's words settled in. The darkness was already inside him. He felt a cold sweat trickle down his spine, but he forced himself to stay grounded. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was something more, something caught between two worlds. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. You're saying I've already been infected by this thing. Infected isn't the right word, Zelthar said, her voice measured. It hasn't taken hold of you, not yet. But the fact that you can feel it, sense it, means you're connected to it. That connection can either be your greatest strength or your downfall. Donovan let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. This isn't exactly what I signed up for, you know. I'm just a guy trying to survive out here, not some conduit for intergalactic energy. Zelthar's eyes softened for a moment, the icy edge to her demeanor fading slightly. None of us are ever truly prepared for the roles we must play, but humans have always thrived in impossible circumstances. That is why you were chosen. Her words carried a strange weight, but there was no time to dwell on the growing mystery of his involvement. The creeping darkness was real, and if what she said was true, they didn't have long before it consumed everything. Donovan straightened, meeting her gaze. So what's the next step? How do I stop this thing from spreading? Zelthar gestured to the console behind her, where a series of alien glyphs flickered across the screen. We need to locate the source of the disturbance. The anomaly is not static. It moves, shifting through space. But we've tracked its path to a sector not far from here. If we can reach it in time, there may still be a way to contain it. Contain it, Donovan repeated. You make it sound like you've tried this before. Zelthar's expression darkened. We have. But our methods failed. We believed we could simply isolate the disturbance, sever it from the energy it feeds on. But the more we cut it off, the more it grew, feeding on what little resistance we offered. This time, we need a different approach. Your connection to it may be the key. Donovan wasn't entirely sure what she meant, but he nodded all the same. All right, let's say we get to this sector. What exactly am I supposed to do once we're there? I'm no expert in alien energy fields or whatever this is. Zelthar's eyes flickered with a strange, unreadable intensity. I will guide you. But the final confrontation will require more than technology. It will require your instincts, your ability to adapt, to survive, to endure. No Kragan or human machine can match that. Donovan frowned but pushed aside his doubts. If he was the only one who could stop this thing, he couldn't afford to hesitate. Fine, let's get moving. Zelthar moved swiftly, entering coordinates into the ship's system. The alien glyphs on the screen shifted, indicating their new course. As the engines roared to life, Donovan felt a shift in the ship's trajectory. They were on their way. The two of them stood in silence for a few moments, the low hum of the ship's systems filling the air. Donovan's mind raced with 1,000 questions about the darkness, about his role in this fight, and about the Kragan commander standing beside him. She was unlike anyone he'd ever met, cold, calculating, but with a strange intensity that drew him in. And despite her alien features, there was something almost familiar in the way she spoke to him, like they were bound by something deeper than just this mission. He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "You've been fighting this thing for centuries. You must have lost a lot." Zelthar's expression hardened. "More than I care to count. My people once ruled vast stretches of the galaxy, our empire unmatched in power. But we were arrogant. We believed our technology made us invincible. The darkness proved us wrong. Now we are scattered, broken, barely holding on to what little remains." There was a bitterness in her voice that caught Donovan off guard. It was the first time he had seen any vulnerability from her, and it reminded him that, beneath the alien exterior, she was still a commander who had suffered loss, just like any soldier. "I get it," Donovan said quietly. "We've lost plenty too. Earth, we've had our fair share of battles. Some of them nearly wiped us out. But we've always found a way to survive." Zelthar glanced at him, her violet eyes searching his face for a moment before she spoke again. "That is why I chose you, Donovan Walsh. Humans have a way of defying the impossible. You face death and destruction, yet you adapt. You thrive. That is something the Kragan have never fully understood." Donovan shrugged, unsure of how to respond. "Guess we're stubborn that way." Zelthar allowed the faintest hint of a smile to touch her lips. "Yes, stubborn. Perhaps that is what we need now." Before Donovan could reply, the ship's alert system chimed, drawing their attention back to the console. Zelthar's fingers flew over the controls, her expression growing grim. "We're approaching the sector," she said, her voice tense. "The anomaly's energy signature is stronger here than we anticipated. It's spreading faster than we expected." Donovan tightened his grip on the console. "What's the plan?" Zelthar glanced at him, her eyes sharp with determination. "We go in. We find the source. And then, you do what only a human can." Donovan's heart raced as the ship dropped out of warp, the view screen revealing a swirling maelstrom of dark energy in the distance. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. An immense void, twisting and writhing like a living entity, consuming the stars around it. This was it, the heart of the darkness. And somehow, Donovan knew that the fate of the galaxy rested on what he did next. The swirling void in front of them seemed alive, its tendrils of dark energy writhing and pulsing, almost like it was aware of their presence. Donovan's breath caught in his throat as he stared out at the chaotic vortex. It wasn't just some anomaly. They were facing something far more sinister, something that felt conscious, intelligent, and hungry. Zelthar's fingers danced across the console, her face etched with concentration. "I will bring us closer, but we must be careful. The energy fields around the disturbance can interfere with the ship's systems." The ship lurched forward slowly, as if pushing against the gravitational pull of the anomaly. Donovan felt the pull himself, an invisible force tugging at him, gnawing at the edges of his mind. He could almost hear a faint whisper, like distant voices calling out to him. "Don't let it in," Zelthar warned, her eyes sharp. "The closer we get, the more it will try to invade your thoughts. You must stay focused." Donovan clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay grounded. He wasn't going to let some cosmic force mess with his head. What exactly are we dealing with here? Is this thing sentient? Zelthar's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "We don't fully understand it. We've encountered remnants of it in the past, but nothing of this scale. It seems to feed on energy, both technological and organic. It consumes and assimilates, growing stronger with every life it touches." Donovan's stomach twisted. "So it's not just some natural phenomenon. It's a predator." Zelthar nodded grimly. "Yes, and if we do not stop it, it will continue to spread across the galaxy, devouring everything in its path." The weight of her words settled heavily on Donovan. This wasn't just about him or the Kragan Empire anymore. If they failed here, The entire galaxy could fall to this darkness. As they approached the edge of the swirling void, the ship's systems began to flicker. Warning lights flashed across the console, and the hum of the engines grew erratic. "Hold on," Selthar shouted, her voice strained as she fought to keep control of the ship. "The energy fields are destabilizing the core. I'll have to take us in manually." Donovan braced himself against the control panel as the ship shook violently. The closer they got, the more intense the pull became. It wasn't just physical. He could feel the darkness pressing against his mind, trying to worm its way in. "Stay with me, Donovan," Selthar said through gritted teeth, her hand steady on the controls. "We're almost there." With a final lurch, the ship broke through the outer edges of the anomaly. The swirling void engulfed them, but within the chaos, there was an eerie calm. The ship's shaking subsided, and the view screen filled with a haunting, dark expanse. In the center of the void, suspended like a heart in a web of tendrils, was the source. It was a massive, pulsating sphere of black energy, its surface rippling with faint flashes of light as it absorbed everything around it. Donovan felt a shiver run down his spine. This was it, the heart of the darkness. Selthar's voice was low and tense. "We've located the core. Now we must act quickly before it senses us." Donovan swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. "All right, what's the plan?" Selthar turned to face him, her expression grim but resolute. "You must enter the core." Donovan blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, what?" "The darkness feeds on energy, but it's also drawn to life. Your connection to it makes you the only one who can breach its defenses. Once inside, you must sever the core's connection to the energy it's feeding on." "And how exactly am I supposed to do that?" Donovan asked, his heart racing. Selthar hesitated for the first time, her eyes betraying a flicker of uncertainty. "I don't know." Donovan's mouth went dry. He was about to walk into the heart of an intergalactic predator, and they didn't even have a solid plan. But there was no time to back out now. The darkness was spreading, and if they didn't act, everyone, would be consumed. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "All right, let's do this." Selthar moved quickly, activating a series of commands on the console. "I'll open a breach in the core's defenses. It won't be stable for long, so you'll have to move fast." Donovan nodded, slipping on the helmet of his suit and sealing it. "Got it." As the ship maneuvered closer to the core, Selthar reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, and when he looked up, her violet eyes were filled with a strange, unspoken intensity. "Be careful, human," she said quietly. "You may be our last hope." Donovan gave her a small, determined nod before stepping into the airlock. The door hissed shut behind him, and the momentary silence was filled only by the sound of his own breathing. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he stared out at the dark expanse before him. The airlock opened, and he launched himself into the void. The darkness enveloped him immediately, its oppressive weight pressing against him from all sides. It wasn't like space. There was no sense of freedom, no vast emptiness. This was alive, coiling around him, testing his resolve. Donovan pushed forward, his mind focused on the core ahead. He could feel it pulsing, a throbbing presence that called to him, pulling him deeper into its grip. The voices grew louder, their whispers filling his ears, trying to confuse him, to lure him away. But he forced himself to focus, blocking them out as he pushed through the darkness. And then he reached it. The core loomed before him, a massive sphere of swirling black energy. It pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm, drawing him closer, urging him to surrender. But Donovan wasn't here to surrender. He was here to stop it. Without hesitation, he reached out, his hand brushing against the surface of the core. The moment he made contact, a shockwave of energy surged through him, and for a brief moment, everything went dark. Then he felt it, the connection. The darkness was alive, and now so was he. Donovan gasped as the shockwave rippled through his body, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer force of the connection. It wasn't just energy. He could feel emotions, memories, and thoughts from countless beings that had been consumed by the darkness. Their pain, their fear, their desperate struggles to hold on to life before being swallowed whole. For a moment, it felt like the darkness had already won, like it had taken him too. But in the depths of his mind, a voice cut through the chaos. Fight. It was his own voice, the voice of the soldier that had survived wars, battles, and endless odds. The voice that refused to surrender. He could feel the darkness trying to pull him deeper, trying to drag him into oblivion, but he wouldn't let it. Not now. Not ever. Donovan's grip tightened on the core, and with all his strength, he forced his mind to focus. He wasn't here to give in. He was here to sever the connection, to stop this thing once and for all. The voices of the darkness roared in protest, but he shut them out, concentrating on the faint pulse of energy that lay beneath the chaos. There it was, the source, the heart of the darkness, the tether that held everything together. "I see it," he whispered to himself, his voice steady now. He reached deeper, pushing past the swirling energy, past the whispers and memories, until he found the connection. It was like a thin thread, delicate but incredibly strong, binding the darkness to the endless power it fed on. Now came the hard part. Donovan knew this wasn't just about brute strength. The darkness had consumed thousands, millions of lives, and the energy it held was more than he could fathom. If he pulled too hard, it could release a surge of power that would obliterate everything. But if he didn't pull hard enough, the connection would hold, and the darkness would continue its rampage. He took a deep breath, focusing on the thread. Slowly, carefully, he began to unravel it. At first, it resisted, the energy pushing back against him. But Donovan held firm, concentrating on each movement, each delicate twist of the thread. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, the effort taxing not just his body but his mind. The darkness howled in his ears, the whispers growing louder, more desperate. It was trying to confuse him, to make him doubt himself. Images flashed before his eyes. His family, his friends, everything he'd ever loved. The darkness was showing him what he would lose if he failed. But Donovan wasn't fooled. He knew what was at stake. He had to stay strong. For them. The thread began to unravel faster now, the connection weakening. Donovan's heart pounded as he realized he was close. So close. Just a little more, and the darkness would lose its grip. Suddenly, a surge of energy exploded from the core, slamming into him with the force of a tidal wave. Donovan cried out, his body convulsing as the power surged through him. For a moment, he thought he might lose his grip, that the darkness would overwhelm him. But then he felt it. A hand, strong and steady, gripping his shoulder. Focus, human. Zelthar's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, grounding him. Somehow, she was there with him, her presence a steady anchor in the storm. Donovan's vision cleared, the darkness receding slightly. With renewed strength, he tightened his grip on the thread and pulled. With a final, decisive twist, the connection snapped. The effect was immediate. The darkness shuddered violently, the core pulsating wildly as the energy that had sustained it began to collapse. The swirling void around them trembled, its tendrils recoiling as the source of its power was severed. Donovan felt the weight lift from his mind, the oppressive presence of the darkness fading. He staggered back, gasping for air, his body weak from the effort. But it was done. The core flickered one last time before collapsing in on itself, the black energy dissipating into the void. It was over. Donovan floated there for a moment, staring at the space where the core had been. The darkness was gone, its power broken. He had won. But as the adrenaline began to fade, he realized just how much of himself he had given in the fight. His body ached, his mind felt stretched thin, and he could barely keep his eyes open. The energy of the darkness had taken its toll. Zelthar's voice crackled through his calm. Donovan, are you still with me? He forced a smile, though she couldn't see it. Yeah, I'm still here. There was a pause, and then her voice softened. You did it. He nodded weakly, too tired to speak. A moment later, the ship's tractor beam locked onto him, pulling him back toward the airlock. As he was brought inside, the door hissed shut, and he collapsed onto the cold metal floor, his limbs heavy and unresponsive. Zelther stood over him, her expression unreadable. For the first time, though, there was no coldness in her eyes, only a quiet respect. You've done what no one else could, human, she said softly, kneeling beside him. You've saved us all. Donovan let out a tired chuckle. Just doing my job. But as the exhaustion pulled him into unconsciousness, one thought lingered in his mind. Was it really over? Or had he merely delayed the inevitable? Because in the depths of the galaxy, darkness always waits to rise again.